Happy Monday, beautiful vegans. I'm Mariquita Solis, vegan empowerment coach, and I'm excited to see you on Mondays because I usually don't. And we're here live on YouTube. If you're here watching, please subscribe, LinkedIn, and my Facebook group. And I'm here with Janine Bandcroft of Plant Powered Radio. She's going to give her experience in 22 years as a vegan. It's her journey, what's changed throughout the years. I know a lot of us feel like it's that times aren't changing fast enough, but I would love to hear 22 years ago to today how much things have really changed. So if you're watching, please let us know where you're watching from and give StreamYard permission to use your name in the comments, because we're about to hear a great deal of wisdom from a beautiful vegan soul, Janine. And so thank you so much for coming, Janine.
Oh, thank you so much, Mariquita. It's very enjoyable to be here. I hope I can fulfill all of these wishes for inspiration. Yeah.
Well, you're inspiring me. 22 years as a vegan. That's amazing. And hi, Aaron. Thanks for watching. Aaron's the one who connected us. So yeah, he said Janine is a very powerful force in the vegan movement. So I thought, well, I need to find out who Janine is and hear her story.
Cool.
So tell me 22 years ago, what was it that led you to veganism? Were you always an animal lover? I mean, what were you like as a child? Just tell me a little bit about, your thoughts on that.
Okay, I'd like to take it back 32 years ago if I could, because that's when I became vegetarian. And that was a big jump because I was raised in rural Alberta, which is, cattle country, and kind of brought up in this environment where you just eat animals. That's just part of what you do, and I was in 4-H with my horse and stuff like that. So the idea of, I had heard of vegetarians and I had never heard of vegans growing up, but I was in California 32 years ago going to college, and the earthquake happened in San Francisco Bay Area. I was at college, and when that hit, and it was a very humbling experience. It was the one where the Bay Street Bridge partly collapsed, you may recall. It was a massive, and neighborhoods had gas leaks, and it was very scary. I was in the library at the college watching a video, and it just sounded like this train was coming through the building, and I had, my brain just went, okay, get under the table, and I did that, and the computers went flying off the desks, and afterwards we sort of stayed there for a while, and then we were ushered out the building, and it was a big shock. All of my friends, one of them, she sort of said, I was sitting in math class thinking, geez, I wish I could get out of here, and then all of a sudden this earthquake happened, and so be careful what you wish for, kind of thing. But that sort of set me on the path, because then we started learning about earthquakes. And also I was interested in environment. I was enrolled in an ecology course, and was learning about rainforest destruction and just the devastation of the earth. That's the first time I'd heard about climate change. So I just thought, oh, and I remember I heard Dr. Clapper. Dr. Clapper was speaking at our college, and he talked about how much land is used to raise cows to consume them, and we could just not eat the cows, And so again, I didn't get quite to vegan, but I did get to vegetarian, and I became vegetarian at that time. I just thought, this is such a humbling experience, this earthquake, and I'm just a tiny, tiny thing on this massively powerful planet. And I want to be on the good side of these spirits and this energy and do what I can to protect this beautiful place. So I sold my car and I became vegetarian, and thought, okay, that's great. I'm doing it, man. I'm hip and cool, and I'm on the bus, and then 10 years later, I started hearing about veganism and went to one or two talks from just kind of local people. And I remember hearing about the dairy situation, and strangely dismissed it. I think I was addicted. Like, I seriously think there's something addictive about dairy and cheese. And I didn't want to give it up. And I told myself, I need that calcium. And so strangely, it wasn't until I was looking for housing and I found this apartment where I live right now, actually. And it's a 2-bedroom apartment, and it was being subleased with a vegan. And so he was looking for specifically a vegan. It wasn't good enough to be vegetarian to move in here, and it's a lovely place, and I kind of really wanted to move in. So I said, okay, I could be vegan. And so I'm a little ashamed to say that it took that. I was kind of forced. But thankfully, I'm ever grateful, because it's 22 years ago now that I moved into this place and went on this new path, thinking, oh, it's not going to be that hard. I'll have to give up the dairy. I even thought, I could go out to the restaurant if I want and eat some cheese or whatever. But he was an activist as well. And so I think that's part of the trouble is, for most of us, we're born into this world and we're surrounded by this idea that it's totally okay and necessary to consume these animals, and we don't hear that there are other people doing it differently and surviving and thriving, and there's no reinforcement. And so once I was in this environment with this person and all his friends, and going to rallies with them and realizing that there's this whole other community, and it's not unusual and it's not weird and they're not unhealthy. And then it just became a part of my world. And eventually there's no going back, right? Yeah. So, yeah.
That's an amazing story. I mean, that he was brought into your life at that time, right? And you're very lucky that you had him to show you. And I mean, I think that a lot of us feel guilty, but I mean, we are so brainwashed. And Aaron has a comment about that. I mean, about dairy. But I wanted to put this wonderful comment, which is so nice. Thank you, Aaron. I love these two beautiful vegan heroes. You're a hero too. He's a musical.
Love you too, Aaron.
Yeah, he's very, he inspires us. So, but what he's talking about here is dairy is literally addictive. It's so true. So, I mean, being gentle with ourselves, realizing that we were addicted and we were brainwashed, and we just didn't know. And I mean, when you hear you've got to, you've got to eat the milk, you've got to just drink milk, 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 or you're going to be weak and you're not going to have enough protein and everything. And so it's scary to think, wait a minute, I can't go against everything that I've learned my whole life, right? I mean, this is what you've been taught as a little child. So it's very understandable why it takes people a long time to go against these beliefs that have just been ingrained so much, and then all the additives in the food that are keeping us addicted. Yes, and here's another comment from Ann. There's no going back, and there's no wanting to go back. Go back to what? Unnecessary cruelty. Why? Yes, yes. So thank you for those comments. So Janine, I don't even know if I introduced you as Janine Bandcroft, Plant Powered Radio. Anyway, so I'm just excited that you're here. So you met. Now, what about the people? I wanted to ask you about 4-H and the people you grew up with there. So is that rodeo also? Did you do rodeos?
No, and I wasn't in it very long. It was just one of those rural things that they put the kids into, and it just had to do with something for the rural kids to do, really. And I think for the ones with farm animals, they would have sort of a spring show, and they would bring their animals and show off the animals that they had raised and looked after. I didn't live on that kind of a farm. I just had horses and dogs. So, I wasn't there for very long, but it just the growing up among that headspace, that this is what we do. We breed animals. We bring them, we put them on show. We put them in cages and travel them around, and then we kill them and eat them. And that becomes so normalized. It's really amazing how challenging it is to get away from that. So I'm thankful now I work in 2 different vegan restaurants. I mean, if you had told me 20 years ago that I'd be working in 2 different vegan restaurants, I never would have believed that. There were no vegan restaurants 22 years ago. There was no soy milk to speak of. There was one kind of grainy, beany soy milk that wasn't very tasty at all. And there were no alternative, fake meat products on the shelves. So it was all very Whole Foods vegan. You probably remember that too, hey?
No, I don't remember that. I mean, I was vegetarian for a long time. And then, so yeah, I started vegetarian in 95. So, but I remember having my tofurkey and trying to make it the best out of it, the little roast at Thanksgiving, and I mean, we've come a long way since those days, right? And now you go in and there's a whole section of different kind of milks. Before it was just like that one soy milk that you'd be lucky if you could find. So
right, and all the different cheeses and ice creams, and it's amazing that people aren't vegan. I think at this point I'm just always surprised that people aren't. And I think a lot of it has to do with just that habit and that programming that we've had. And also, I think the hardest part of it really is our social interactions, isn't it? Because suddenly we are different. And so I was different when I became vegetarian. I did not do that in rural Alberta. Luckily, I remember when Katie Lang came out as vegetarian in Alberta, and that caused a massive uproar. And but by the time I was in California, so West Coast, it's okay, you can be whatever you want to be, kind of thing. So that was cool. But then becoming vegan, I remember my mother just going, "Really? Like it's not enough to be vegetarian?" Okay, but she was pretty good about going along with it. But I think that's the hardest part, isn't it? Because especially our parents and our families, and they want to have the traditional, so much about tradition has to do with food and the centerpiece on the table. And so that was kind of a challenge. She was pretty good about going along with it. And eventually I think she realized that it was healthier and it was tasty. And so we started by doing the tofurkey, and then eventually it was like, why are we doing this? Let's just make something different. I remember one year we made a vegan shepherd's pie. They were British, so shepherd's pie was a big deal. And so we made this really delicious vegan shepherd's pie. And so it's a lot easier now in terms of food items and also in terms of social acceptance, I think.
Yeah, I think so too. Those were, I mean, those were very limited days. So yes, I can see why we could easily say, well, I mean, today it's very easy to be vegan, as if you're comparing. So, and look, Aaron says he can make a mean tofurkey. All right, we'll be headed to your house on Thanksgiving. But what about your parents? I'd like to hear more about that. What did they say? Did anyone in your family become vegan or vegetarian? Tell me about that. I'm really interested in that.
Sure. Yeah. Well, by this point, my parents were already older. I was born 13 years after my brothers, sort of thing. So I was a bit late arrival. And so by this point, my family was kind of spread out, and we weren't having the big, dinners that we used to have on the acreage. But I would try to, I would go, and their families. I mean, their neighbors sometimes would drop in, and there would be, the neighborhood potlucks and that sort of thing. So I always tried to bring something as delicious as possible, right? I think that's a really important part of it, is to be the vegan, like be the proud vegan. Don't be the apologetic vegan, and bring something that's beautiful that everyone can eat, of course. And I try to make it gluten-free and nut-free so that everybody can actually eat it. And my mom, yeah, like I say, she was pretty experimental. I remember one time I went and she had made some kind of a stew or something, and she was so proud of it. And then I asked her about the ingredients, and she had put, was it Worcestershire sauce in it? And I looked at the ingredients on the Worcestershire sauce, and there were anchovies in there. Oh, she was so upset. I remember that. It's the only time I remember her getting angry. Like, she always thought it was a bit extreme, but she went along with it. But this was the one day she had really worked hard on this thing, and she just happened to put this Worcestershire in it, and I refused it, and that did not go down well. I could have, hopefully I handled it well. I probably could have handled it better. But I refused to eat it. I don't think we should ever compromise our values, even if our family is upset. We need to stay strong to our values and apologize to them and just say, I'm sorry you didn't understand that this has anchovies in it. But as vegans, we learn to read all the ingredients and, let me make something different today. Don't worry about it, sort of thing. And I really appreciate your effort. I hope I said that, something like that. But for the most part, and my dad, he would just eat anything that was put in front of him. So that was easy, right? So, but interestingly, then later, as they got older and got a little dementia, and they just sort of sank back into their habits. Like, it really is a habit, and I think the longer we're vegan, the more determined we are that we're never going back to that. And there's no situation where it's okay to compromise and eat our animal friends. But for whatever reason, they weren't devoted vegans. They were vegan because when I went over, they would be plant-based, sort of thing. So sadly they did. But I will say that my dad, when he was in his care home at the very end and I had power of attorney, I was able to, it was a Seventh-day Adventist run facility. And the Seventh-day Adventists, this is a Seventh-day Adventists that have the plant-based, they're vegetarian mostly, right? I think it's the Seventh-day Adventists. Yeah.
Mhm.
And so I put this to them. I wanted them to give him vegan food, but they wouldn't go along with that. But they would give him vegetarian. So for the last couple of years of his life, he was a vegetarian, and I feel good about that.
Well, that is good. Yeah. I mean, some people can only shift a little, you just don't ever know. I mean, to try to break all these traditions, I mean, it's harder for some people. And especially like my parents, my dad, and I mean, they both grew up in rural Mexico. So, I mean, and there were no factory farms then. So it's really hard for them to even understand that, it was hard for them. So,
Mm.
and I wanted to stay on good terms with my dad because being with him, the more he was with me, the more he would eat vegan, the more he was with me and my brother. So we can't cut ties. Of course. I mean, I wouldn't want to cut ties with my father at all anyway, but to cut ties would be eating more meat. He would be eating more meat. So.
But there's lots of beans and rice, right?
Oh yeah, they ate a lot of that. But when
Yeah.
he moved to America, he didn't want to eat that anymore. So yes,
Oh,
yeah.
yeah.
And Aaron's asking if I can post a Facebook link, which I don't know if I just posted it, but I don't know if it goes to LinkedIn. But it's in YouTube. Watch it on YouTube, also, which I could post. Yeah, and it's in Empowered Vegans, Voices of Strength for Mother Earth on Facebook, that group, and my YouTube channel. So I don't know if I'm answering the right question, but but anyway, yeah, parents are a tricky thing, and relatives. What about, do you have brothers and sisters or anybody else in your family that really supported you or went vegan or vegetarian?
Yeah, well, my brothers, like I say, they were all 13, 15 years older than me, so I was never really all that close to them. And we're all kind of spread out. So one's in Wales, one's in Thailand, and then the other is on the mainland here. So I don't actually, they were never really, they just thought I was the crazy girl in the family, so that never really caught on. I seem to recall my mom, if there were occasion when they were coming over and when I was there, she would prepare the meat stuff for them, right? And then the veggie stuff for me, because it's manly, I guess, you got to give the men the meat. I don't know. It's crazy. Thank goodness for men like Aaron who understand that that's not what manly men are all about, right?
I know exactly that there are some, men out there that have seen the light, right? Yeah, like Aaron, and then Jeff Palmer, who's going to be my guest on Thursday. He was really bringing up this whole idea of how do we reach the men that think that, that are so programmed again in this eating meat is manly. I mean, he's a bodybuilder. He came from, from attempted suicide to now being a leader in the field, and in all areas of his life, in health aspects, mental health, physical health, and so yeah, and that's the question. I did see a silk commercial with a farmer, which was pretty. I was very impressed to see that a farmer saying that this Greek yogurt didn't have to come from a cow. So that was interesting.
Oh,
And
good.
yeah, I just saw that yesterday, and then I saw it again today. So I was happy to see that. So all these little signs. I went out to eat at a restaurant last night, at Taqueria. I can't roll my R's. So my mom and dad are probably like looking at me down from wherever they are, like, oh, she still can't roll her R's. But anyway, I went to eat at a taqueria, and I got some cauliflower tacos, and I saw that the table next to me was eating them too, which I thought, wow, this was not a vegan restaurant. So I felt like that's amazing. Usually people, just look over and see someone else eating a vegan meal, it just usually doesn't happen. So I felt good about that. And here's Aaron. Yeah, so that was happy. It's interesting how the smells of cooked animal flesh still linger as desirable for a while once you're a vegan, but eventually they can only be associated with the cruelty that created them. I know, and that's so true, because we grow up smelling, you smell a barbecue and you don't think about what that really is, and yeah, that's right. Awareness is everything, isn't it?
What I've noticed is sometimes I'll smell a barbecue, and before I clue into what it is, it's just the smell, and then I'll go, my first initial reaction is, it's something good. And then immediately my brain goes, no, that's barbecue. And then I go, oh, I'm hungry. If I'm hungry, I respond to those smells differently than when I'm just not hungry at all, and immediately go, yeah, I don't like that smell. Yeah, I think there should be some kind of bylaws against smell pollution in the summertime. It's so hard to go for a walk in the early evening when it's dinner time because all the barbecues, I find it really annoying. I have to schedule my outings around this nasty thing that happens, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's just a huge change in perspective, isn't it? I mean, wow. I mean, to think where I was, I mean, years and years ago to now. I mean, I remember seeing a deer hanging in the basement, that they had killed and brought for dinner. And for some reason, I wasn't even, I didn't have any, I don't know how in the world I couldn't have any. It was just normal. Okay, there's a deer that's been killed. It's really strange now because I can see myself looking at the deer. And I don't know, because how does that go along with loving animals? I mean, that's the big question. So,
Yeah, we're taught to compartmentalize our love, right? Like we love our cats and dogs, and we have to not feel about those other animals. Yeah, we used to get I didn't see a hanging deer, but we used to get shipments because we were on an acreage and it was cold, right? Cold winters, and we would get deliveries of half a cow, or half a, I'm ashamed to say, I like half a lamb, and it was just, oh, here come the Hutterites with our annual meat delivery for the freezer, and that's what sustained us. And like you, I remember when I was really little, I think I would say, but lamb, Mom, why are we eating a lamb? And the answer was just that's what it is. And I think we have similarities, Mariquita, because rural Mexico, it's not the wealthiest environment to live in. My parents grew up in post-war, well, during the war, right? Second war in England. And my mom grew up in the North, where it's notoriously poorer. So this idea, especially during wartime, of using every part of the animal, she carried that through my whole life almost. And so I would question, I don't sweet bits, Mom. I don't think I want to eat like those brains. I don't. And there was occasion where I would just refuse, but it's hard because you're powerless. You're powerless for one thing as a child, right? And then you kind of have to do this thing. It's sustenance, and so I understand, like, from their perspective, from our parents' perspective, this was how they survived, really, right? But we luckily don't have to do that. And I think people think it's expensive to be vegan. Certainly, if you eat at the restaurants where I work, if you were to eat there every day, it gets very expensive, right? And no, I can't afford to eat at the restaurants where I work very often either, and I can't afford to buy, animal or mock animal protein and cheeses and all the fancy stuff. But if you're just eating whole foods and some tofu or beans and a bunch of veggies and some mushrooms, you're going to get all the nutrients you need, and it's on the cheap. So I'm not sure why our parents didn't know that, but that was the world they lived in, right? So yeah, something that interesting. That's where they went. They went to hunting hares in wartime and deer and stuff like that. I guess it was easier for them than trying to grow crops and harvest crops. Yeah.
yeah, I know what you mean because, well, when my family came here, it was like a new place and they were going to eat all this. I mean, just like the countries that are without heart disease and, without cancer, without all these big issues. And then when they go to our diet, then things switch. Well, my dad and mom, I mean, this is like a big new thing, a dream. But I do remember as a child, like eating something, and I said, "What is this?" And then my mom said, "Don't tell her, don't tell her," and,
Right.
it's like, oh my gosh, yeah. So
isn't that interesting that they can't tell us, they can't take us to a slaughterhouse and show us how it works. And the people who say, but plants have feelings too. And, on some level, I agree. Everything has feelings. I think there's some level of consciousness there, but it's not a central nervous system kind of consciousness. And, I saw a little video the other day, and it was a clerk in a grocery store, and she was scanning stuff through, and as it went through, it showed you how it was packaged. So the broccoli would go through, and it just showed someone chopping up the broccoli, and then the beans would go through, and it showed someone picking the beans off the plant, and then the chicken breast would go through, and then it would flash just for a moment to the, I thought that was very clever, right? This in terms of feeling pain. I mean, the thing is that we have to eat, we have to consume something. I have a friend who's determined that there are breatharians in the world, and she wants to be one. And I've never met a breatharian. Apparently they actually exist.
What is that? I don't even know what that is.
Apparently they survive on air. So like I said, I never met one. I don't know how long they survive on air, but there's websites about it and Facebook groups and stuff. I don't know how real any of it is, but we have to consume something. So do we choose to consume the thing that feels the most pain, or do we? How about the fruitarians? I have a great deal of respect for the fruitarians, and I think if I lived in a different climate, I could be a fruitarian. So the idea that you just pick the fruit from the branches rather than digging up the whole plant and chopping it up, right? I think I could probably get into that. I don't know. How about you?
I think I could too. I mean, I think it would be a challenge for me too. I would love to do that. I would love to do that. But I mean, in the right environment, yes. I mean, yeah, in the right environment, I think it would be beautiful. And do you know what? I don't know what this is that Aaron put here.
Where is it?
Nim. Anyway, Aaron, let me know what that is. NIMAIDL. Nime. I can't even say it. Anyway, here's what he put. If it's not good enough for your eyes, how is it good enough for your stomach? Gary, another thing I don't want to pronounce. Yorovsky, I think. That's very true. You're right. And that's why, again, like Melinda and John McCartney were talking about, if the slaughterhouses had glass walls, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that's true, Erin. The meat industry consumes more plants than vegans do. That's absolutely true, right? So what do you think about this new thing now where there's this sort of hype about, the Great Reset, and they're going to make us eat insects and cell-based meat. And so people are freaking out. I'm noticing that, I'm not going to eat insects. I'm not going to eat cell-based meats. No way. And so I feel like the vegans, this is a real opportunity for us to interject and say, you know what? I'm not going to eat insects or cell-based meat either. And there's no reason to do that. There's millions of us literally thriving on just eating plants. So just like we say no to eating animals, and we can say no to eating insects. I'm not sure why. It's really interesting right now. There's this kind of attempt to control the narrative, I think. And
I've never heard about the insects.
Yeah. So this is part of the World Economic Forum's agenda to digitize our reality, basically. And I don't know how much of this you've heard about. They're wanting all of us to have an app on our phones, basically, that will replace everything. It will contain all our banking information and all our medical information and all our consumer information, and so that can be tracked. And if we make some people are saying that they could even go so far as to if we make a purchase that is undesirable in their eyes, they'll give us a slap on the wrist kind of thing. And it's sort of a social credit system, right? So if you behave according to the rules of the society has put out, you will gain favor. And if you don't, then you'll be punished in some way. Maybe your bank account will be reduced or whatever. Like there's people seriously in doing this stuff and talking about it and writing about it and wanting to do it. So part of it is it seems like what they're doing is they're using the discussion about climate change and the climate crisis to say, okay, there's climate crisis and we need to do something about it. And what we're going to do is we're going to monitor all your activities. So if you drive your car, you're going to lose some points. If you eat meat, you're going to lose points. All these sorts of things. And so the options then are going to be, instead of eating meat, you can eat insects. And for some reason, people are just going from there to there without saying, wait a minute, I don't have to do either of those things. So I think it's a real opportunity if people want to dive into that discussion online. There's some kind of interesting discussions happening on the Twitter.
I bet there are. Wow. Well, I'm glad you're bringing a lot of things to surface for me. Thank you. And I'm getting an answer from Aaron about Nimai Delgado, vegan champion bodybuilder. Yeah. Now, is that the guy that is in Game Changers that's pushing?
Oh, maybe.
Maybe.
Yeah. Cool.
And he's saying, funny about eating insects, though. People have been eating shellac from beetles forever. Bee balm and honey. Yeah. And shellac I don't know if I'm saying that right, but is that like the carmine? Like when you see carmine, that's from beetles. And it's a red I think it's a red. Maybe I'm all off track, but I was always told that if you see that on a label, that's in like lipstick and stuff, and that comes out of this.
Oh, okay. I did not know. Well, that's a whole other part of it, isn't it? So we talked about food, but when I became vegan 22 years ago after moving into this apartment, like I say, at first I thought, oh, that'll, I can do that. I can change my food. But then I started to realize about my clothing and my wool and, my leather. And it's amazing how much vegetarians are not being kind to animals. It was a real awakening to suddenly, well, it wasn't suddenly, it took some time, And at first, then there's this discussion that you have with yourself, or I did anyways, about, okay, well, I've already got this item. I've got these shoes. I might as well honor the animal is the kind of the phrasing that I hear a lot. Honor the animal by wearing the shoes because they're already in existence. The animal's already suffered. But then, so I did that for a while. But then I realized, you know what? I'm not really vegan if I'm sending a message that I'm vegan, but I'm wearing this leather just for now, So I think part of it too is for people, if there's people who are thinking maybe vegetarian and then vegan, I would say skip the vegetarian, just skip it because it's too confusing. It's nothing really. It's hardly worth the effort. If you're going to go vegetarian, just go vegan and do it all the way and get rid of all the leather and all the wool and all the what's the other stuff, silk and all that stuff, and you check your makeup and your shampoos and just ditch it all and feel the freedom, man. Feel the energy shift in your world. Aaron's written a song about billions of friends, and I interpret that as, it's a beautiful song, and I interpret it as, as we become vegan, and the more we're vegan and the more devoted we are as vegans in our clothing and all our consumer choices, that the animal energy is vibrant, right? And I really believe in spiritual energy, and that the animal spirit energy wants us to be vegan and wants to help us be vegan, and that it's there with us, and there's billions and billions like Carl Sagan, right? Billions and billions of these animal energy entities, I think, or just flow to move us in that direction. So I found it really liberating to finally just give the stuff away, give it to the homeless, or do something and replace it rather than let it wear out. Because every time I look at it, it would be a reminder. And that's the other thing. I don't want to be reminded of what I used to be,
Yeah, I know what you mean. I've heard both of those arguments. So just go vegan. Yeah, let's just make everyone that's watching, please just go vegan, and we don't have to have these conversations anymore. We'll have parties. Right?
Well, I'll admit that a part of me thinks this World Economic Forum Great Reset agenda must go vegan program isn't a bad idea. I'm glad that I'm not an authoritarian dictator, because I would probably want to regiment. I would say, no, you must go vegan. You're not going to have meat anymore. But of course, we can't do that. We can't do that to our fellow humans. We have to honor the freedom of our neighbors and our friends to make their choices. I really ultimately, I guess, believe in the power of education. And that's the hard part, right? That's where I launched plant-powered radio. And you want to get to that eventually.
Yeah, I'm glad that I was about to say, we got to talk about plant-powered radio.
Yeah, I was a radio and host for about 20 years. Well, starting about the time that I became vegan, I found a radio station I didn't find it. It found me, actually. A friend of mine invited me onto his show, and I kind of got addicted to radio at that point. And I had a radio program called The Winds of Change on a local community publicly funded radio station for a long time. And it was looking at peace and justice and environment and animal issues. But then I had sort of given it up, because I got a full-time paid job outside of my home that required my schedule to be more solid. And so I had to give up my radio. But when the March 2020 happened, and I was, okay, what am I going to do now? I thought I could do that. I could do a podcast and a YouTube. And so I did. I created Plant Powered Radio, and I interviewed, it was specifically vegans, just vegan activists, vegan scientists, vegan nutritionists, vegan artists, vegan musicians. And then I went to the radio station and said, would you be interested in having this on the radio? Can I come back to radio? And they said, sure, that's great. So I was back on the radio, and that felt really empowering. Like the just get the word out there. I really believe the more we can counter this dominant narrative with just any information, their information is so pervasive. If you watch TV or Netflix, it's astonishing how often people will go into the fridge, and they can't just go into the fridge and get something. They have to hold it up and say it's milk, or they have to say, oh, we're going to go for dinner, and then they have to talk about their animal, all the different animals that they ate at dinner. Like, it's really amazing how pervasive it is. And I don't think people realize that until they become vegan. So any effort we can make to infiltrate that, I think, is really important. So so Plant Powered Radio was a really great project for about a year and a half. Yeah, a lot. And it's still on YouTube. I'm not doing interviews anymore, but it's still on YouTube. If people want to check Dr. Will Tuttle and just, all kinds of amazing people that I never thought I'd ever be able to talk to about animal testing. That's a whole other thing. The ways that animals are used in experiments. Currently, Neuralink, I think it's called, Elon Musk's company, has monkeys wired up with their brains wired up, because he's into this transhumanism thing. He wants to be able to so that our thoughts can be directed into the car, so that the car will know automatically what we want. And so like horrible things are happening every single moment of every single day. So anyways, I found it was really helped sort of occupy my time during those years. And I got really educated as well. It's amazing. There's so many really wonderful people doing vegan activism from so many different perspectives. And so the first step of that, of course, is becoming vegan. And I remember an old bumper sticker I saw a long time ago, and it said veganism is direct action, like just being vegan, just being that happy vegan. Maybe wear the t-shirt, go and be the happy, healthy vegan. And sometimes that's the best we can do. But shows like yours, Marquita, and the work that you're doing to help people just be strong in their vegan commitment, anything that we can do, I think that all that animal energy is with us.
Well, I think what you said, and thank you for that, what you said about we don't have to, go into the meals. We're not apologizing. I thought that was a great statement. We're not coming to the family meal and being sorry for who we are, right? We're not, we're happy about who we are because we're living in alignment with what we believe in, right? So we do want to portray ourselves as happy individuals, because if we don't portray ourselves that way, who's going to want to be vegan? Right? They're going to say, look how much she's suffering as a vegan. Who in the world? Well, I'm not going to be vegan. So yeah, I love that. Unapologetic. And then Aaron is saying, so tired of default omnivore in the media. I know, huh? I know. And then they say that vegans are so, that we're always talking about being vegan, but look at the real truth. And thanks for watching, Julius. He's working so hard in Africa to get the word out there, helping animals and trying to educate people in Africa. And then one other comment, Plant Powered Radio, YouTube is a phenomenon. So many absolutely amazing interview vegan superheroes. Yeah, I'm going to check it out. Again, I have checked it out, but I'm going to look for the one with Dr. Will Tuttle. He's coming on my show. So that's exciting. Yeah, I spoke with him the other day. He was very, very gracious and nice. And so I'd love to see.
He's so friendly. I was so nervous to meet him because he's such a hero. And he's just such a nice guy, really. That's so great. Yeah.
Yeah, he's so down to earth. Yeah. It's a blessing. That's what the vegan community is. Is very warm and supportive, I think. We do have people that, there are those in the vegan community that want to attack other vegans, and that's one part of it that I hope, with my coaching people, that I can help people understand not to attack other people that are on the same mission. Let's do this in a loving, peaceful manner, like you're saying, unforgiving, but standing in this happy, peaceful vegan and being proud of who we are.
Right. And if I could say another thing too, I've noticed that I kind of noticed it a lot during the the 22 years there, or the 2 years between 2020, 2022. Doing a lot of Zoom sessions, right, with vegan groups and drop-ins and just chit chats. And this was during the kind of Trump years as well, the Trumpian thing, whatever. And I'm in Canada, and we get all the news from the US, which is kind of weird. We get inundated with US news to the point where, yeah. Anyways, but I noticed that people were really derogatory. People would come into sometimes a group and say, and just start talking as if everybody in that group is exactly like them. And I think it's important to remember that vegans come from all different places. We're kind of a unique group in that we come from the right, and we come from the left, and we come from the center, and we're all different colors, and we're all different backgrounds, and we're all different socioeconomic status. So if you come into a room and you start saying things about, oh, those Trumpians, there is a chance that you're going to alienate one or two of those people. So I kind of feel like my suggestion is, when we're in a vegan space, be vegan. And absolutely, it's okay to have our own personal politics, of course, but to respect that other people there might not have the same politics. And if you want to have that discussion with people, that's great, but maybe go, don't lead with that. Like, don't assume everybody's on the same page with absolutely everything else in your life. I made that mistake as a vegan. I just assumed, oh, we're all the same kind of vegans, but there's a bazillion different kinds of vegans, right? And that's good. Diversity is, the earth teaches us that diversity is how we survive on this planet. This is how survival happens on this planet. So I think we need to share that diversity, but remember that we have this common ground, and that we're doing this for the animals. Ultimately, we're being vegan for ourselves, sure, and for the environment, but for the animals. And the animals don't need us to be in fighting, right? And if we can hold that common ground, then we're going to be more difficult to divide, because there's always going to be an effort to divide us, because that's how the ruling classes work, and the rulers work, is divide and conquer strategies. And you can bet there's massive energy coming from big ag and big pharma to divide us vegans, because we're the healthiest people on the planet, and that doesn't serve well. That doesn't serve big pharma's interests very well. And also, I think animal agriculture is their biggest customer, right? Big pharma. So big pharma is very invested as well in this whole project of keeping us eating animals, or crickets if we don't count, or whatever, but not looking at the vegan piece, I think, is the point. They don't want us to consider that vegan piece. So yeah, I think that's important, to just be respectful with each other, and we can maybe learn from each other about what different kind of vegans there are in the world, right?
Definitely, yeah, we can. And I made that mistake too one time. I remember I met this guy, and I said he was vegan. I was like, oh my gosh, I'm so excited to meet you. We can go protest together. And then I never heard from him again. So who knows what he thought. But anyway, it was just very interesting, making an assumption, right? And that was, I thought about that when you were saying that. So I've got a couple of dogs here, but one is kind of likes to chew up things. So I was kind of, if you see me looking away, that's what's happening now. She's trying to get on me. But anyway, and here's a good point that Erin's saying, that animals don't care if we're right or left. They just care if we're hurting them or not. Exactly, right? And then, he's also saying vegans aren't perfect. You're right. And thank you, right, for saying, Erin, God bless all vegans. anyway, if we're just doing their part in ending animal cruelty, right? Yeah, we're just people doing the best we can. We might mess up, and that's okay. We're going to be gentle with ourselves, and we're going to keep moving forward. We're not going to beat ourselves up all day, because what good does that do? It doesn't help the animals at all if we're beating ourselves up and living in, sadness. It's we've got to live in this powerful place where we're not desperate, we're not apologizing, but we're living in alignment. And for me, veganism is about loving all. So if I'm really hating other people because they're not vegan, then I feel like I've stepped out of alignment with the true meaning of veganism and compassion for all. Again, and I have compassion for people that are still brainwashed and they're still developing heart disease and, high blood pressure and diabetes, and they don't understand. They can't make the connection, just like I couldn't when I stood there and looked at that deer. How could I not make the connection? But I couldn't, right in front of my face. If I couldn't connect then, my gosh, there would have been a chance that I never would have gotten it, but somehow I got it on the road of life.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah.
So
thank goodness, right? Thank goodness. And there's always, when I look back and I can see that there were people who dropped little seeds in my path. I remember I was working at the university when I was still vegetarian and sort of starting to learn about this vegan thing. And this one woman, I said to her, oh, well, I went to the farmer's market on the weekend and the people brought some cheese from their local farm. That's okay, isn't it? And she didn't lecture me or say it was right or wrong. She said to me, next time ask them, what did she say? Oh gosh, what did she say? She said, ask them what happened, what they do to the boy calves. That's what she said. Just ask them what they do with all the boy calves. And that was a big awakening. So that put it back on me. That gave me a project, right? And I thought about it. And at first I was like, no, I don't want to ask them. I don't want to know, right? But
right.
eventually that nagged at me.
Right.
And I think I went back once and then the second time again, because it was so delicious. It really was. And I went back again and I asked them and they told me, and then that was it. Okay, well, I guess I can't do that anymore. So, we never know what it is that we will say. And I never saw that. I don't know where she is now. I don't even remember her name, but I'll always remember that lesson, right? So we never know what impact we're having.
Yeah, I love the way she left that up to you, and she didn't judge you or make you feel ashamed. She just let you go on your journey to investigate. So that's beautiful. Yeah,
the doggies like that story too.
I know. I guess so. I love the way that. Yeah, that was in. She had a lot of intuition. Butter. Shh. Good girl. Okay.
Her name's Butter.
Butter. So I'm pet sitting her. Yes.
Right. Vegan butter.
Vegan butter.
Okay.
Butter. So it's easy to see pre-vegans as villains, but almost all of us were pre-vegan, and all pre-vegans are victims of the indoctrination of the casual disregard of cruelty. Yes. You're right, huh? Yeah, and I think the best we can do is to plant seeds, is to develop friendships with people and with people, and to see people as pre-vegan, like Aaron talks about, right? Pre-vegan. And how do we help them on the journey instead of how do we hinder them on the journey, right? Shh. So, we're just doing the best we can and learning from experiences.
Yeah, and I hope somebody has a story about something I've done and they're telling that story about how that helped them, and they may not even remember who I was or who I am. Because sometimes it's hard. Like some days I'll be that calm, gentle, loving vegan who remembers that we were all pre-vegan. And then other days it's hell no,
That's okay.
You gotta get this. You gotta get it, So, for example, kind of an acquaintance, a neighbor in my building, and she's a very kind and compassionate woman, and she's very Christian. And we were having a conversation about being. I was sort of as I do. I raised being vegan and talked about vegan cheese, and she went, ew. And I said, oh no, man, it's so delicious. It's really, I'll bring you some. And she just said, no, you know what? I'm not interested in that. Jesus ate lamb, and I'm going to eat lamb as well. And so I don't know what you say to that. I didn't know what to say to that. And so I sent her, we had a little bit of email correspondence, and I was thinking, how do I deal with this? Because I respect that people have different spiritual beliefs. And I tried to sort of say, well, all those years ago, they didn't have like modern kitchen appliances like refrigeration and stuff like that. So they kind of had to eat animals. Like, I think our ancestors, there was a point where they kind of had to eat animals, and I'll accept that, forgive them. But we don't have to do that anymore. And then I put a photo of a Thanksgiving dinner where the humans had laid out a whole array of vegan food, pies, and like Thanksgiving dinner, and they were standing back, and the turkeys were eating the vegan food. So I just sent her that and said, this is the only kind of the only way that turkeys should be invited to, or you should have turkeys for dinner, or I would ever have turkeys for dinner, or something like that. And I haven't heard from her since. But so sometimes it's hard to know, right? Sometimes, but I was torn. Like, do I just send her a picture of a lamb hanging in a slaughterhouse? Is that going to do it for her? I don't know. You never know what's gonna click with a person. Sometimes people really need that no, this is wrong, this is what it looks like, this is what it is. And then other times they really respond to the, go back and ask them what happens to the cow, right? So
I don't know. I mean, it's it's like all these seeds planted throughout the whole life, and then boom, then you get it. So who knows?
and when we get it, we sure do, don't we? And thank goodness for that. There's a growing vegan tribe, and we have access to social media where we can find each other. And then once we find, oh, okay, you're vegan, like you say, you can't just assume everything else is. Then you start to work the nuances, right? Okay, what else? What's your favorite? This and that. What do you like? Where do where do you live? This sort of thing, right? What kind of activities do you like to do? What is your politics and stuff like that? But this is some very solid groundwork, I think, that we will not imprison our fellow creatures. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. And Aaron saying, I love this conversation. I love it too. I think we're going to have to wrap it up. But yeah, I've learned a lot. And I mean, to hear all these experiences that you've had, it's, it's very enlightening and very educational for other people that are on the vegan journey, at the beginning of the vegan journey, and not knowing how to handle things. So thank you. And Janine, is there anything you wanted to say to wrap up this conversation you wanted to leave the audience with? And thanks, Aaron, for watching. Everybody, thanks for watching.
Yeah. Aaron's your biggest fan, it looks like today.
He's your fan, I think. He's like, I'm not going to miss Janine.
That's so great. Well, thank you. I really appreciate. I've done a lot of interviews, right? And I think this is the first time I've been interviewed for a very long time. So it's kind of fun to be on the other end of it. Thank you, and for all the work that you're doing. I guess my final message would be that none of us are free until all of us are free. and that includes our human friends and our animal friends as well. Now, I think this planet is, I don't think I'm going to see a vegan world on this planet before I leave it, for sure. But that's not the point. I think the point that I've come to the realization that it's not about whether I can change the world. I used to think I could change the world. I worked really hard to try to change the world. Obviously, I did not succeed in that, but
Wow.
but more important than that, I think it's about our individual soul journey. I really do. I think that if we can come here and not be enslaved by all the trappings of the material world and all the cruelty, and not get caught up in just doing things because everybody else is doing them and because it's what we've always been done. I think if we can free ourselves and our spirit and protect our bodies, protect our bodies from toxins and poisonous foods and substances, and leave here knowing that we've done the best that we could with the body that we had, and that our spirit has remained free. I think that's really the best part of being vegan, and that's the best we can do here.
Well, amen to that. I mean, to keep your soul, I mean, a beautiful vegan soul, really to live from your soul. I mean, the soul knows what really is the way to live in peace, how to live in peace. And that's what veganism is. So thank you so much for that. I love that summary you had. And I hope everybody goes to Plant Powered Radio on YouTube. YouTube, right?
Yeah.
Tell everybody. And where else can they find you?
Well, I'm not online a lot as much as I was. I'm on Twitter mostly. Enviro Vegan is my handle on Twitter. And that's really the best place to find me.
All right. Well, thank you so much for this conversation, everything you've done. I mean, amazing forces that you've done. I mean, that you are an amazing force that you put out there into the world to change the world. So thank you for that. And thanks, Aaron and Julius and everybody for watching. I'm just honored to be a part of this beautiful vegan space. And thanks for this lovely comment. I love listening to Heroes of Mine discussing this essential topic. Well, thank you so much. We're grateful for you and your music and just everyone's vegan joy. Thank you so much. And thank you for Janine for joining me. And I hope everybody has a blessed day.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye, y'all.